Take a look at these buildings. When you're packed into a single Bronx room with 3 siblings and a mother working herself to the bone, the world feels massive and indifferent. Inside our apartment, my mother, a devout Jehovah's Witness, instilled the belief that this physical earth would one day be scrubbed clean of its agony. But looking out the window, the brawls and the sirens on the street made that paradise feel a million miles away. In that environment, your internal engine adapts. It starts running purely on survival reflexes, the hypervigilance of the Creston Avenue pavement, the mechanical grind of gang initiations, and the constant hustle for petty cash just to buy a little breathing space. I was running fast, but I didn't have a map. I was trying to survive a physical war zone, completely unaware that a rescue mission was already tracking my coordinates. That chase eventually led to the dizzying scale of the Times Square church balcony. I wasn't there for a sermon. I was high on Bronx weed and intensely paranoid, actively hiding in the shadows of the upper rows just to find a place to crash where no one would look me in the eye. The intervention didn't come through a booming voice or a religious lecture. It was a radical, physical wave of warmth that broke through the chemical haze in my brain. Grace didn't wait for a sober mind or a sterilized sanctuary to make contact. It launched its mission at my most broken coordinates, right there in the smoke. But the path out of the Bronx isn't a straight line, and I drifted back into the shadows, hanging with the Echo Mob and the American gangsters until the police cruisers finally caught up with me. I ended up in a cold cell, surrounded by adult addicts and threats of violence. Yet the warmth I felt in that church balcony was still following me. Divine love didn't care about the handcuffs or the dirty record. Years later, I had achieved what looked like a total reconstruction. I was 35, navigating corporate tech at Google, and being invited into specialized pastoral leadership programs. But despite the external success, my internal engine was constantly, inexplicably redlining. I was fighting an invisible war. At 2 a.m, my mind would click into absolute hyperfocus, mapping out entire ministry visions. But those spikes were always followed by a paralyzing exhaustion, making it impossible to maintain the structures of a normal life. The streets taught me how to fight external enemies, but a biological engine running on undiagnosed trauma and neurodivergence is a different kind of warfare, one where the battlefield is inside your own head. This internal collapse eventually peaked in the dark of a freezing Bronx apartment. It was 3:30 in the morning, and my physical and emotional systems had reached total depletion. I stood over a freezing puddle of water forming dead-centered on the floor. I looked at the ceiling, but the wood was bone dry. The water cut through the psychological static of my exhaustion. It served as tangible proof that the Father wasn't waiting for the chaos to clear. He was sitting right in the middle of it. True grace means the Father pulls up a seat in the wreckage of a broken mind and says, "I see you right where you are." This journey eventually led me to Washington Heights, to a sunlit apartment with a clear view of the George Washington Bridge. The chaotic, shifting pieces of the past finally settled into place. Reaching this clarity required God to pull the emergency brake on my ministry career. Stepping away from that pastoral program saved the man before the performance could start, leading me directly to an ADHD diagnosis at age 35. The diagnosis gave a structural name to the noise. It explained why the engine had been redlining for 30 years and showed me exactly how my mind was wired to function. I realized I was built like the Apostle Peter, bold, quick to jump out of the boat, and constantly reacting out of raw passion. Peter didn't have modern medication, but he had a circle of brothers who anchored his structure. I learned that the solution wasn't to try harder, but to yield my wiring to a team and a divine alignment. The decades of collapsing programs and exhaustion were just the raw scaffolding the architect used to clear the ground. You cannot outrun a Father who tracks your exact coordinates to rebuild you from the studs.